When I was growing up as a young kid, I remember watching my favorite athletes make these amazing plays to seal up the game. Whether it was in baseball where they'd make that diving grab to seal up the win. In American football, the last drive of the game, they sealed up the win with that winning touchdown pass. And it was those career-defining moments that, A, they fired me up, but B, they led me down this path of, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to perform under pressure like that when it matters most. So naturally, as a kid, I would practice these same moves on the couch, or I would go outside and imagine myself marching down the field and, having that game-winning drive. Now, I know it probably sounds weird, but I know some of you guys did this too. But it was that replaying these scenarios time after time as a young kid that led to that obsession of wanting to perform under pressure that I took into my own athletic career and then now into business. So as I finished up my competitive athletic career, I took that experience and I began teaching athletes on how to achieve their highest potential and how to reach their highest performance in both the physical and mental game. So after working with hundreds of athletes and over the past 12 years, I put in over 10,000 hours in sport performance. And in this video, I want to show you the things that I've learned, but also how you can use them in your own life. So with that said, I got these 5 common keys that my highest performing athletes do that separate them from the rest. Number 1, they treat every single rep with intent. Now, what I mean here is they are efficient in everything that you can imagine. There's no wasted effort. There's no wasted movement. Now, sure, when you're first learning how to do a movement, you go through this learning period that you're just trying to get things down. But as you perfect the technique, the thinking doesn't stop there. It's how can I just make this a little bit better? How can I come off the line a little bit faster? How can I jump a little higher? It's these really small details that really start to separate those that are just good and those that actually become great. Now, when you get to this certain point in your athleticism or your performance, you've got to start looking for these little 1% changes that you can make. Now, some things I'm talking about here is the mind, the psychological side, your nutrition, your recovery. What are these things that you can do where you can squeeze out another 1% of improvement that help you, reach your full potential? That's really the thing that you see when you see an average athlete from a great athlete. You're going to see average athletes, they just kind of go through the motion. They just show up and they don't really put any thought because they've decided that they have learned the technique already. But it's these same average athletes that when they fail in their performance, they get upset. What happened? Why didn't I make that happen? But in reality, the fact is, how are you going to beat that person who is studying the things to get 1% better? How are you going to beat that guy? Especially if you've never even practiced like that to begin with. So number 2, they work the mental game more than the physical game. Now, this psychological component, this is, if not the most important part of all performance. Your best athletes, they're going to know that mental rehearsal is just as important as the physical component of it. I'm sure you heard like the blanket statement. So you got to have a tough mindset. You got to have a, good attitude when you go into the game, but it's much, much deeper than that. Just think about it like this. Practicing is only half of the game, and you can't spend every single hour of every single day practicing. Now I'm talking physically. You're not going to recover, and eventually you're just going to work yourself into the ground. But what a lot of athletes don't know, especially younger athletes, is the mind doesn't have the ability to distinguish, a real vivid thought in your imagination, something that is so crystal clear from something that has actually happened. This was referenced in the book Psycho-Cybernetics. So one of the best ways that athletes can improve their performance is to visualize these situations that they can be in and see themselves responding if something goes wrong and still finding success. It feels like a long time ago, but I first realized how this works when I was a junior in high school. I had injured my wrist, so now it's basketball season, and I'll be honest, basketball is not my favorite sport, but I wasn't able to practice with my team because I had injured my wrist about 6 weeks prior. So I had a cast on my hand, and throughout that time, I was just rehearsing mentally. I was playing all these different things out in my mind. How would I respond in this play? And I was playing all of these different scenarios. I'm talking heavy visualization sessions. Since I couldn't be out there physically, I started studying, well, how are things unfolding in the plays? When someone sets a screen, what does that look like from the outside view? And then I would take that into my visualization and imagine that was me coming off that screen going for a jump shot. And then I kid you not, when I got back onto the court 6 weeks later, I'd played one of the best games that I had ever played. I was in the state of flow, my shots, my passes, everything was precise, and I was completely locked into this game. This is just one small example of how visualization can help you improve your performance, and it can apply to any sport. It can even apply to your everyday life. And number 3, they think different. So there's really 2 parts to this. You've got this one side that, I heard from a coach years ago, and he talked about being a cerebral athlete. So these athletes that separate themselves from good and great and actually meet their full potential, they're very cerebral cerebral or strategic athletes. And I'm talking about in both training and practice. And then the second part of this is, when it's time to perform, they actually don't think at all. So let's take the first part of this when I talk about cerebral and strategic as far as being an athlete goes. They are absolute students of the game. I touched on this a little bit about, the average athletes that just kind of go through the motions. These elite athletes, these ones that reach their potential, these are the ones that they dissect everything in the game so they can fully understand it and know how to respond in any situation. It starts by they completely dial in their technique in these thousands of reps that they do in practice. As you continue to condition yourself to do that, these things just become second nature and your body just kind of responds when it needs to. But the more in-depth part of this cerebral practice as an athlete is they practice situational awareness. So what I mean by situational awareness, it's putting yourself in a situation in practice that it's maybe more pressure or it's a position of disadvantage. And you basically work through that scenario and find out if you fail, why did you fail? But if you succeed, taking notes on, okay, if this happens, how come I succeeded? Why did I succeed? So they do different scenario drills like this. And, when it comes time in the game where there is pressure and they've got their back against the wall, they look so calm and relaxed when they perform that things just look effortless. Think about like in American football where, the quarterback is at a position and he throws a ball off of his back foot. Or, in baseball where he has to make a diving backhanded grab and throw it to first, and beat the runner by a step to get the out. It's these abnormal situations that when you watch it, you think, oh my gosh, how is that even possible? But you don't realize that, man, they have practiced this thousands of times. That is honestly a routine play. Their body has just responded the way that it's been taught. Now, like I mentioned, there were two parts to this. The second part is that they don't think at all. So you probably heard the term flow state. That's basically where things become effortless and you're totally immersed in the process and your performance is at the highest possible level it can be. Now, these athletes realize that flow is just something that you can't try to get into it. It just happens by completely immersing yourself in the process, being focused on present moment. I mean, it's something you hear a lot of high performers talk about. Back in the day, Bruce Lee, he talked about be like water, be flexible and be adaptable to your environment. And then Dennis Whaley, he had this quote that was, the less you try to impress, the more impressive you are. It's about being calm, collected, mentally locked into this present moment. When you can do that, you have the ability to just adapt. And it's kind of a weird thing, but you're not even thinking about it. Your body just does it. It's instinctual. I see it time and time again, especially when people are trying to learn a new movement with me. They fail because they overthink. I'll have them do something. And, a lot of teaching and coaching is distraction, but in a way that helps them achieve what they're trying to do. Essentially, I'm taking the mind out of the process. When I can get them to remove their overthinking self and just say, hey, just do what we talked about. You know how to do this. And I start to reinforce these types of habits. They tend to do it. It goes back to, when you see these high performing athletes make these crazy plays or they have these very high performances, they're not straining. They look effortless. For lack of a better term, just try harder. Sometimes that backfires. Number 4, these athletes find someone to emulate as they're coming up. We talked a little bit about visualization and, mental rehearsal. And one of the best things that you can do as a young athlete is learn how to do this. Learn how to visualize yourself moving through the game, through situations. How do things look? How do they sound? What are the sensations that you're experiencing during this moment? But then take it a step further. Take the athlete that you look up to and then visualize yourself doing what they did. It's been said many, many times that Kobe Bryant emulated Michael Jordan as he was coming up, and a lot of his performance showed that type of success. It showed in his playing style, his aggression towards the game, and the guy ended up winning multiple championships. He's going to go down as one of the best of all time, just like the guy he looked up to, Michael Jordan. When I talk about, finding that athlete that you want to emulate, there's a reason why these guys are the best in the world. So take what they've done to perfect their craft and use that to help you improve. Another thing that you can do is I tell my athletes to look at a blend of athletes. When it comes to my American football athletes, I tell them to look at the speed of Tyreek Hill, look at how he goes in between his cuts, and look at how he separates from defenders. At the same time, look at how Tom Brady responded in high pressure situations. You never saw the guy look rattled. But then even deeper than that, how did these guys practice? What do they do in their pregame routines? How do they relax? How do they get their body calm before going into this competitive state? But also look at how they respond under pressure. Are these guys consistent when the pressure's on? These these are just some of the things that I want my athletes thinking about when it comes to their own competitive career, because just putting in hard work isn't enough. It goes back to the cerebral points that I was given earlier. How good of a student of the game are you? And then number 5, they completely immerse themselves in the process. So this may rub people the wrong way, but this is what I've seen work time after time after time with my athletes as well as myself. But if you want to reach your absolute highest performance, I'm talking about your highest potential genetically, you need to treat your craft like it's your job. And I mean in the most serious sense. I talked about these average athletes, they just kind of go through the motions, not these athletes that separate themselves from the good crowd. It's the ones that become great. They show up early. They do these things like I'm talking about, study the game on their downtime. They rehearse mentally. They visualize. They treat it as though I'm here for business. I'm here to perform. And that's what I'm going to do. I even have some of my athletes, they use this type of alter ego effect that when they put on their game jersey, that's like their business suit. And when that's on, it's time for business. It's time to get things done. I'm here to perform. It's so important that you have to adopt this type of confidence in order to reach your highest potential. You can't just kind of will your way into it. It takes some thought. It takes some actual confidence. It's every move, every thought, every action that you do. This is all focused around being the best that you could possibly be in your craft. Now, like I said, this may be too intense for some people, but are we talking about trying to reach your genetic potential, or are we talking about just trying to have fun and play the game? It's two different scenarios. So you got to define what you're trying to do. And of course, I'm not saying that it has to be this way forever, because over time your interests change and all that stuff, but that's a different story. But that's why I think, developing this psychological component for especially young athletes, but athletes in general, it's so important in their development, not only as an athlete, but as a human being. You take this, what you learn in sport, and you use it later on in your life, becoming a better friend, brother, husband, father, whatever it is, you can use this in your life. You can even use it in business. So after over the 10,000 hours that I put into this, over the years, the hundreds of athletes, you can tell that there is both a mental and physical shift that is required to reach your genetic potential, to be the highest performing athlete that you can be. Now, if you look really closely, you can see that a lot of mediocre athletes that use these techniques that I'm talking about, and they use these things to get them that 1% better, they'll outperform these highly talented athletes time after time after time. So you don't have to be the most talented guy on the field today, but give yourself a year, give yourself 2-3 years. You're going to start turning heads if you can implement some of these principles. Now, as you know, I coach athletes to reach their highest potential, both physically and mentally. Now, if this is something that sounds interesting to you, just reach out to me and we'll talk about what that looks like. We make sure you do the psychological things right, but also the physical things. Are you training right? Are you eating right? All these different things. It's all combined. Regardless, and this goes for anyone, once you conquer that mind game of self-doubt, that's when all things in your life become possible.